Imagine paying off your house completely, no mortgage, no bank payments, no debt hanging over your head. Most people believe that moment is the finish line of financial stress. You picture freedom, lower monthly expenses, and the feeling that life finally becomes affordable. Friends congratulate you, family calls you responsible, and society quietly tells you that you made it. No more interest payments, no more risk, just stability and security. That is the emotional promise of a paid-off home, and millions of hardworking people organize their entire financial lives around reaching that single powerful milestone, as if nothing else matters nearly as much. From childhood, many of us hear the same message: own your home outright, and you will always be safe. The logic sounds simple. Without a mortgage, your biggest monthly expense disappears, which should automatically create breathing room in your budget. People imagine retirement becoming stress-free, job loss becoming manageable, and emergencies feeling less dangerous. The house becomes a symbol of control in a financial world that often feels unpredictable, confusing, and honestly unfair. When everything else seems unstable, owning your home feels like planting a permanent flag of certainty in an uncertain economic landscape today. But here is the uncomfortable reality: that emotional promise and actual financial outcomes are not always the same. Paying off a house removes one bill, but it does not remove financial risk. It does not guarantee freedom. And it definitely does not mean your money suddenly works harder for you. In fact, for many households, the opposite quietly happens. Their largest asset becomes fully owned, yet their financial flexibility actually shrinks. The system feels safe on the surface, but underneath, their margin in the budget stays tight, their cash flow stays limited, and real wealth growth often slows more than expected. Let's do the math using a simple example. Imagine someone buys a $400,000 home with a 20% down payment. They borrow $320,000 on a 30-year loan at 6% interest. Their monthly payment, including taxes and insurance, is about $2,200. After 30 years, they celebrate owning the home free and clear. Emotionally, it feels like winning. Financially, most people assume their expenses suddenly collapse, creating instant breathing room and permanent stability in their monthly financial life from that moment forward without any meaningful ongoing financial pressure. But reality looks different almost immediately. Property taxes still exist. Insurance still exists. Maintenance never disappears. A common rule of thumb is that homeowners spend 1% of property value annually on maintenance alone. On a $400,000 house, that equals $4,000 every year, or at about $330 monthly. Property taxes might add another $400 monthly, and insurance maybe $150. Suddenly, the paid-off home still costs nearly $900 every single month just to exist, even without a mortgage payment attached to the property you fully own right now. That is not financial freedom. That is simply a different expense structure. The payment changed, but the financial responsibility never left. Now consider another hidden cost most people ignore completely: opportunity cost. The homeowner who rushed to eliminate their mortgage often directed extra cash toward principal instead of investing. Suppose they paid an additional $1,000 monthly for 15 years to become debt-free faster. That equals $180,000 of extra payments that never entered investment accounts, where compound growth could quietly multiply their financial resources over time for future spending needs and long-term security. If that same money earned an average 7% annual return, which is historically reasonable for diversified stock portfolios, those contributions could grow to over $350,000 after 15 years. Stretch that to 30 years, and the value approaches $700,000. That difference represents real wealth that never existed because emotional comfort felt more important than long-term growth. The homeowner owns their house sooner, but their investment portfolio stays smaller, their passive income stays limited, and their financial flexibility quietly shrinks year after year without obvious warning signs appearing in daily spending decisions or lifestyle. This creates a strange psychological illusion. The homeowner feels richer because debt is gone, yet their net worth growth may actually slow compared to someone who kept a manageable mortgage and invested consistently. One person owns more home equity, the other owns more income-producing assets. Only one of those generates cash flow. And cash flow is what protects you during layoffs, recessions, and unexpected medical costs. Equity feels impressive on paper, but it does not pay bills unless you sell, refinance, or borrow against it, which introduces new risk right when stability matters most in your personal financial timeline. This is where many households become financially trapped without realizing it. Their wealth is concentrated in one large illiquid asset. Imagine needing $50,000 quickly for a medical emergency or business opportunity. If most of your net worth sits inside walls and flooring, access becomes complicated. Selling takes months. Borrowing requires approval, fees, and interest. Meanwhile, someone with diversified investments could liquidate assets in days or hours. Liquidity is not emotional, but it is incredibly practical when real life moves faster than financial systems designed around long approval processes and strict lending standards applied by cautious financial institutions everywhere. Another overlooked reality appears after the celebration ends. Many homeowners assume eliminating their mortgage automatically lowers stress, yet surveys consistently show financial anxiety often continues, simply shifting focus. Instead of worrying about payments, people worry about repairs, property value declines, and rising tax assessments. A new roof can cost $15,000. A major plumbing failure might cost $8,000. These expenses rarely arrive gradually. They arrive suddenly, forcing large cash outflows that strain savings if investments were sacrificed earlier to accelerate mortgage payoff decisions driven by emotion, rather than careful long-term financial planning and realistic cost forecasting models. This pattern explains why some retirees own valuable homes yet still feel financially insecure. Their housing cost is low, but their liquid assets are limited. They cannot easily convert property value into spendable income without selling the place they emotionally depend on. That tension creates stress, not freedom. They achieve the cultural goal, yet still manage tight budgets, careful spending, and constant monitoring of every unexpected expense. The house is paid off, but financial flexibility never fully arrived because cash flow never meaningfully improved compared to earlier working years, when income was stronger and saving opportunities were easier to maintain. So if the emotional promise of a paid-off house does not automatically create freedom, what actually does? That is what we will explore next, because understanding the hidden financial mechanics behind home equity can completely change how you build real wealth and protect your future. If this breakdown helped you see the numbers more clearly, subscribe for more honest financial explanations that respect your intelligence and your time. Thanks for watching, and remember, you are not failing. You are learning how money actually works in the real world beyond comforting assumptions and simplified cultural beliefs about financial security today. Now let's talk about the smarter way to think about home equity, because the real issue is not whether paying off your house is good or bad, but whether it improves your long-term financial position in measurable ways that increase flexibility, stability, and income over decades, instead of simply creating emotional comfort in the present. Many people approach mortgage payoff like a moral decision rather than a financial calculation. But money does not respond to emotion. It responds to cash flow, returns, risk, and time, which means every dollar should be evaluated based on what it could realistically earn elsewhere. If your mortgage interest rate is 4% and diversified investments historically return 7% annually, the math clearly shows that aggressive early payoff may reduce long-term wealth, even if it reduces monthly obligations in the short run. Let's look at a real-world comparison to make this concrete and practical for everyday decision making inside a normal household budget, where trade-offs are unavoidable and financial priorities compete constantly for limited resources. Consider two homeowners, each with a $300,000 mortgage at 5% interest over 30 years with identical incomes, spending habits, and risk tolerance. Person 1 sends an extra $1,000 monthly toward principal and eliminates the loan in about 15 years, achieving psychological relief and lower required payments much sooner than scheduled. Person 2 keeps the standard payment, but invests that same $1,000 monthly into a diversified portfolio, earning an average 7% annually while maintaining the original mortgage schedule. After 15 years, Person 1 owns their house free and clear, but has minimal investment growth beyond retirement contributions already required through employer plans and basic savings habits. Person 2 still carries mortgage debt, yet their investment account holds roughly $300,000 depending on market performance, reinvested dividends, and consistent monthly contributions. At year 30, the difference becomes even more dramatic because compounding accelerates over time like momentum, building quietly, then rapidly as balances grow larger and generate returns on previous returns. Person 1 owns a valuable home but modest financial assets, while person 2 owns the same home eventually plus an investment portfolio approaching $700,000 or more depending on returns. That portfolio can produce income potentially $28,000 annually using a conservative 4% withdrawal rate, which directly supports living expenses without selling the house. This example does not prove mortgages should never be paid off early, but it shows why the decision must be strategic rather than emotional, because opportunity cost compounds just like investment returns do. There are absolutely situations where paying off a house makes strong financial sense, and ignoring those would be just as misguided as blindly rushing toward payoff without analysis. If your mortgage interest rate is extremely high compared to realistic investment returns, eliminating that debt becomes mathematically attractive because the guaranteed savings exceed likely market performance after taxes and fees. If job income is unstable and reducing fixed expenses dramatically improves survival probability during downturns, payoff can function as risk management rather than pure return optimization. If retirement is approaching and guaranteed income sources are limited, removing monthly obligations may simplify budgeting and reduce sequence of returns risk when markets fluctuate early in retirement. And if someone simply values psychological certainty more than potential growth, that preference itself carries legitimate value because personal finance includes behavior, not just spreadsheets and projections. But outside those specific conditions, treating home equity as a flexible financial tool often creates more long-term stability and real wealth than locking capital permanently inside property. One practical strategy is maintaining a manageable mortgage while prioritizing diversified investing that builds liquid assets capable of generating income regardless of housing market conditions. Another approach involves building substantial emergency reserves before accelerating principal payments, ensuring liquidity exists before equity concentration increases further over time. Some homeowners also use periodic refinancing or strategic home equity borrowing to access capital for investments that produce higher expected returns than the borrowing cost while maintaining disciplined risk control. This concept, called leverage, sounds intimidating, but in simple terms, it means using relatively low-cost debt to control assets that have higher expected growth potential over long time horizons. When managed carefully, leverage can accelerate wealth building because your money works in multiple places simultaneously rather than sitting idle inside a single non-productive asset. Of course, leverage increases risk if misused, which is why cash flow stability and conservative borrowing ratios matter more than chasing maximum possible returns without safeguards. A healthy guideline many planners use is keeping total housing costs below 25% of gross income, while maintaining at least 6 months of expenses in accessible savings. When those conditions are met, a mortgage becomes a manageable financial tool rather than a crushing burden that destroys your margin in the budget. The deeper shift is philosophical, but grounded in actual numbers, because real wealth is not defined by what you fully own, but by what produces reliable income with controlled risk. A paid-off house provides shelter and stability, but an income-producing portfolio provides optionality, mobility, and resilience when life changes unexpectedly. The goal is not choosing one over the other, but balancing both so your financial structure remains adaptable across decades of economic change, personal transitions, and market cycles. Think of home equity as stored potential energy, while investments represent kinetic energy, actively moving, generating momentum, and doing financial work every day. Both forms matter, but a system relying only on stored energy cannot sustain long-term financial freedom without ongoing income generation. When you start viewing your house as one component inside a broader financial ecosystem, decisions become clearer and less emotional. You evaluate interest rates, investment returns, liquidity needs, tax treatment, and risk tolerance together, instead of chasing a single symbolic milestone that may or may not improve your actual financial position. That perspective removes guilt from carrying manageable debt and replaces it with intentional planning focused on long-term outcomes rather than cultural expectations. And perhaps most importantly, it reminds you that you are not failing if your mortgage still exists, because financial progress is measured by increasing flexibility and expanding opportunity. The system often rewards appearances of ownership more than functional wealth, which is why many disciplined households still feel financially trapped, despite doing everything they were told was correct. Real financial freedom comes from building systems that generate income, preserve liquidity, manage risk, and maintain flexibility even when life becomes unpredictable. If this perspective helped you see your housing decisions with more clarity, subscribe for more breakdowns built on actual numbers and practical financial logic. Share this with someone who feels financially trapped by confusing advice about debt and ownership. Thank you for watching, and remember, real wealth is built through clear thinking, consistent action, and decisions guided by math, not myths. Take time to review your numbers, measure opportunity cost carefully, and build a financial structure that supports both stability today and growth tomorrow, so your money works for you consistently through every stage of life. Stay rational, stay patient, and keep building freedom step by step every day.